notes about some folks that are having some health issues that we want you to keep in your prayers. First of all, Elwood Stone is continuing to decline. I think we could say slowly but surely. He is now, unless there have been a change from what Alice Jean told us earlier last week, he is now under hospice care, still at the nursing home, and basically not much changes except that hospice comes in to help keep him comfortable. So, not always, but usually when you hear that hospice is on board, it indicates that someone is getting closer to the end. So, if you have had a desire to want to visit with Stones and see Elwood while he's still with us, it might be a good thing to do sometime before the spring gets beyond us. In our prayers too, we want to remember Pat Cooper, who is recovering from a really bad ankle break. She's at home. And would welcome visitors if you gave her a heads up. And also let's remember Dominic Rossi. I had mistakenly put in the newsletter a couple weeks ago or last week that he would be having surgery this week, but it's really just a consult. He's been wearing a monitor, and they will take all of that data and kind of meet with him. Is it the 27th or 28th? 27th they'll meet with him, and then they'll decide where to from here. And Linda Chopik's father is not in Lake Vista anymore. He's home. Keith doing pretty well. Okay, good. And Linda took Keith took Linda to Dr. Hergenreiter yesterday, and she's going to be needing some treatment on her knee. Maybe say that a little louder.
Torn meniscus.
Yeah. So
it's a what do you call it? Outpatient.
Yeah. So keep her in your prayers. And also Pam Wildman had mentioned to us that Amy Phillips was really having some health issues. So that would be Pam's brother's wife. So, and one other, and this, you may see this and say this is one of Terry's senior moments. The newsletter has a lady named Alice Jean Jones. That's a friend to Alice Jean Stone. And she has been diagnosed with multiple cancers. And it is in really bad shape at this point. So, any others that we need to be aware of? Let's bow in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for all of your blessings, especially the blessing of being in the church and loving our church family and being able to study together and grow in our faith. And we pray that you'll help us as we strive to do that each and every day. And Father, for all of these that have been mentioned here this morning, we pray for them that you would help them to get better. Thank you for ones that have. We especially come to you for the Stone family. Please be with Elwood in his last days and strengthen Alice Jean. Thank you, Father, for your love for us through Christ we pray. Amen. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 21. I'm wanting to bring this series to a close. It's probably one of the longest series we've ever had. We just called it Home Builders. I started to deviate while I was sick last week and shift gears. I started to launch a new Bible class this morning called Life in the Balance. And I thought I've got a list of several things that I think we ought to think about. We're living in a pretty high-tech world, and we're going to have to be making some decisions that are going to be sometimes difficult. And I want to touch on some of those things in the, actually Life in the Balance may be a little bit of a postscript to this whole home builders study. But there, I have to tell you, I just feel woefully inadequate about talking, especially when it comes to some things that are just beyond my knowledge. And in fact, Dick, I know you have a real interest in what we might call apologetics. And if anybody has a degree of expertise on something like cloning, I really welcome your help with a study on that. I think sometimes that is so far beyond us that most of us can't grasp what's going on, not that we're doing it. We just think that will never impact us, and actually the impact can be pretty widespread on things like that. But anyway, we'll save that for another day. But today is another day where I felt like I just needed somebody to step in and help out, not because I'm ignorant on this, but there's so much about this, and we have come so far. I kept thinking of Haley, and I thought about calling Haley to pick her brain a little bit more on this, because she has, in part of her studies as a physician's assistant, she has kind of specialized in neonatal care, which is the caretaking of young newlyborns that are often born with all manner of problems. And you can't go down that course of study without also rubbing shoulders with what we might call in utero care. They're doing things with a child in the womb in terms of helping the child with a disease or whatever that just blows your mind. So today I want to try to sensitively and carefully, because my intention here, I don't want anybody to think, well, he's not in a very good mood, he's been sick for a week and he just wants to take it out on all of us. I just struggle with this subject of abortion. And I struggle on multiple levels. So you take me by the hand and help, let's walk through this a little bit together. Why does somebody decide to have an abortion? And let's put on our most sympathetic bowels of compassion as we try to think about why would somebody decide to have an abortion? Cindy?
Rape.
Because of rape, not wanting to have a child that they had no intention of having. That is probably a very extreme case, isn't it? Although it would be interesting to know the stats of how many that were raped actually ended up bringing about a pregnancy. Sometimes, and again here I don't have the full expertise, but I think sometimes there is at work against conception in the trauma of rape that makes the conception of a child in the process of rape a rare thing. We almost hear it so often as if we think every time somebody's raped there's a baby that's conceived. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think if you were to really research that, especially if you were to tap into the stats on that from people that are really in the know, you would find that that's probably more of a rare thing than you might imagine, that somebody would get pregnant because of a rape. Not dismissing it totally, I'm just saying that is not as common as we might think.
I don't know if it still is now, but I had a miscarriage in January of '88, and at that time, because it was under 8 weeks, they called it a complete abortion. It was a miscarriage, but back then they called it a complete abortion because it was under 8 weeks.
Well, that's new to me, but a lot of things are new to me. so one of our notes here, one of our questions at the bottom, what's the difference between a miscarriage and an abortion? With Cindy's question, that the waters become muddy, don't they? Well, how would you, if somebody asked you what's the difference between a miscarriage and an abortion, how would you define the difference?
I define it as a miscarriage is something your body is doing,
Okay.
and you don't have control over. And an abortion is something you have the control over.
Okay. So on the miscarriage side, it's kind of automatic, or it's a natural rejection of the body for whatever reason to expel the child in the womb. It's involuntary. It's something that you're not in control of. On the other hand, a miscarriage is where you actually decide, I want this baby gone. I don't want to have this baby. So maybe that's the way I think of it. Keith?
You said that wrong. Miscarriage is like would be an accident of some sort. It's not caused by you or anything like that.
Yeah, it could be an accident, or it could just be the body rejecting the fetus for whatever, maybe a disease involved or something like that. I mean, have any of you women, and you don't have to speak on this if you don't want to, have you had a miscarriage where you didn't, it wasn't an accident that brought it on as far as you know. You didn't stumble and fall. You didn't get out there when you were 6 months pregnant or 4 months pregnant or 3 months and try to play softball with the boys and run around and bang into things. You know, it wasn't an accident in that terms, Keith. That's not always necessary to trigger. Sometimes people have miscarriages and the doctors don't know why. They never do give you an answer as to why that happened.
My miscarriage was my second pregnancy, but in my first pregnancy, I was high risk, and I threatened to miscarry at 5 months with my daughter, because I had a blood infection. So my second one that was a miscarriage was.
I think Jeannie's mom, Mark, did your mother lose some children?
Twins.
Lost twins? And I thought there was even more than that. Jeannie's not, she's in the other room with the little ones, but I thought it was more than just one conception, not meaning more than just twins, but it was more than one pregnancy that she had trouble with. So back to my question, why do people have an abortion? Well, I want us to be compassionate, but I want us to be candid about this as well. If we can be candidly compassionate, or compassionately candid. Keith?
Are you saying that if someone, if a woman gets pregnant by a rape and she has a baby, she gets pregnant, you say it's all right to be aborted?
No, I didn't say that at
I mean, is
all.
that one of the questions?
No, I don't think I meant to answer that question. I think there are rare cases where somebody, because of a rape, has an abortion. They get pregnant as a result of rape and therefore have an abortion. I mean, let's. Another question here is at the bottom of our notes today. How can we promote adoption? Well, there are so many families that are wanting. You know, I can testify from back when Jeannie and I were early married and we were trying to have a child and were not able to, and we really explored the possibility of adoption, and quite frankly, we just could not afford it.
Yes.
It was beyond, now, you could easily say, well, your priorities weren't straight. You know, if you really wanted that child, and that's painful, so if you say that to somebody else, be careful, because I know the pain that comes from not only comments, but maybe people speculating or making assumptions about whatever. So we know that there's we know for whatever reason here, and sometimes this is inexplicable, that couples are having more and more trouble having kids. I could ask you right now, do any of you know any young couples that are struggling to have babies? So for whatever reason, and it seems to be a growing trend, back when Jeannie and I, the problem was male infertility. And that seems to be an ongoing issue. So, how did we bring this up? What were we talking about? Adoption. So, Keith, back to your question. Quit getting me sidetracked here. Back to your question. Even if someone finds themselves having, now this is easy for me to say, even if you were to be raped and you found yourself pregnant, there is another option rather than aborting the baby. One option, I guess, would be to go ahead and have the baby and you take care of it yourself, even though you might not be married. The other option is to go ahead and have the baby and put that baby up for adoption, because there are all kinds of people that are just ever so eager to find a child to adopt. Stephen?
To get back to the very first question about why there are some of the reasons, I think one of them that we don't talk about a lot is fear. And a lot of that has to do with the stigmas that come attached to one, either perhaps being a single parent, which I don't think that stigma is as great as it used to be, but I think there is a underlying subconscious stigma that comes to someone who decides to put up their child, because someone can go, oh, well, you have this baby, but you can't take care of it, so why do you have it in the first place? So that same stigma that you put on people who have abortions carries over a lot of times when people can't take care of their child and decide to put them up for adoption.
Yeah, so Stephen, that's a very fair one. There has to be great fear that comes upon a young woman that finds herself expecting and she's not married and doesn't have plans to be married, and all of as Stephen said, the stigma may not be as strong as it used to be, but it's still a stigma there, and depending on your family, it may be very, very strong. So you almost press the panic button. And we're just talking here about the birth, not the physiology of it, but just the arrival of a child unexpectedly. But add to that the fear element of how does that change the trajectory of your future, not only maybe as a wife to someone, but your job and school and all of those kind of things. So yeah, fear is a big element. If the truth is known, that might be one of the biggest drivers of abortion. That when somebody finds themselves in that predicament, they just panic. And maybe they're panicking along with family that are panicking and don't know the answer to it. But one of the simplest solutions seems to be we didn't want this baby, let's just abort this child. What else?
You kind of touched on it, which may sound cold, but some people get an abortion because it's not what they want. They just didn't want it.
Okay,
It's in a way their plan.
so yeah, how could we label that as just for selfish reasons?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about being kind, but we're also trying to be candid. This one might even top this one. You would be shocked, probably, to find out how many people get an abortion for strictly selfish reasons.
Now, you mentioned adoption, and I was thinking of how many people adopt babies from other countries because it's easier to do than adopt
Yeah.
from our own.
Make it very difficult here.
Child pregnancy.
And be to, why should we not? So, again, part of the thing that disturbs me is we're thinking about an atrocity here. I mean, 1973 was the decision Roe v. Wade. So that's, what, 45 years or 46 years? And there are very solid stats. We are not off by saying that there have been 45 million babies. About 1 million babies a year in our country are aborted. You know, you could say that's some kind of a made-up stat from, well, they do keep records of things like this. They're not always maybe as precise as they should be, but if they err, it's usually on the short side. They usually find out that there's more abortions that actually take, I mean, if a woman has an abortion, if a woman aborts a child in the privacy of her home, there's probably no stat for that. She's not going to call up her doctor necessarily, and she may not, the doctor may not have even diagnosed her as being pregnant. Maybe she just comes to that conclusion, and so there's not, well, let me call the doctor so that he can put that in the death records. Again, I'm in a realm that I'm not fully feel confident in, but so the woman that was represented by the Roe side of Roe v. Wade, she, and this is not a made-up story, you can research this and read about it. It's pretty touching, really. She ended up working for an abortion clinic for several years after the 73 decision in her favor. And then, I don't remember now when it was, maybe 8 years or so later, she had a role in one of the abortions where she just, her assignment was to go through the receptacle from the abortion that just took place and to make certain all of the body parts were there so that the abortion doctor did not send the mother home with a little leg or a little arm. It sounds so sick, still lodged in the uterus. And I'm not taking time, you can study this on your own, most of you probably already know it. The manner in which abortions take place, one of the most popular is like a big vacuum cleaner. It's not, I don't know how it works exactly. I read somewhere like it's 20 times stronger than your best shop vac type thing. It must have some capacity to where it can suck something out without sucking the whole uterus out. I don't understand that. But in the process of sucking it out, it's almost like just making mincemeat of whatever it is sucking it out. But evidently the parts can, so the Roe woman ended up, it was her job to go through the receptacle, and she said when she started seeing the little body parts, little arms, little legs, all the parts of the baby, it hit her at that point in a way that had never impacted her, that child that had been aborted was really a little baby. Now that sounds rather infantile, that we would have to come to that level to put two and two together. But this is driving me to one of my major points. The title of our sermon here, our Bible class study is A Defiance of Science. And in our opening comments, well, let's read them together just briefly here. Medical science has come a long way over the last few decades. Haley, you chime in if you want to say something here, especially in the realm of fetal development. And while the field of neonatal obstetrics has blossomed considerably, so has the world of pre-birth care. Diagnostics and screenings are now able to monitor gestation with far greater detail and accuracy than ever before. And most significantly, for what we're talking about here, a wide range of maladies, deformations, diseases can now be treated in utero while still living. So I'm using that to springboard for us to realize that in the world in which we live today, there is absolutely no excuse for someone to have a mentality that whatever's taking place inside that womb before birth is just a big blob of stuff. It's not a baby. It's not, some people insist that we don't call it a child. We'll accept you call it a fetus, but even some are uncomfortable with the concept of a fetus. They just, and today in our technological world, we're able to, I meant to print this out. You can go online and see this. I think it's something called the Diary of an Unborn Child. And it will give you the approximate time during gestation when certain things begin to develop. And it's not the kind of thing where it takes up to 9 months for your little baby to start being a little baby. And again, this becomes so obvious by things like sonograms and all kind of comments or other diagnostic works. So, how in the world a progressive society can make decisions, and here's where I might seem like I'm putting my toe into the realm of politics, and I'm not trying to pick sides on this, but there's just something that's very galling to me about how we can hear certain people decry things happening down at the border where a mommy and a daddy are being separated from their little children, but yet there is nothing, no sense of compassion whatsoever, no sense of guilt, no angst, no hand wringing or anything like that over abortions that are happening to the tune of $1 million a year. How can that be? How can the governor of New York get up and announce this new law and everybody celebrate that it's going to be okay to take a baby's life just right before the day before birth, and everybody applaud, and then they turn on the Empire State Building light and light it up pink as if that's a cause for celebration. I don't get that. I cannot wrap my brains around that. I just don't get that at all. And to me, I'm coming to you, Vic, but to me that's ignorance. That is people in politics who are bowing maybe to some of their constituents, but are denying what's real. It's a defiance of science. You can't do that and say you can't abort a child that's in the last trimester, especially, although we could back it up considerably now. Because we even have babies that are born at 21 months, 21 weeks. So what used to be the norm is because of medical progress and in vitro treatment and diagnostics and all that, now we can back it up. But I'm just talking about the last trimester. 6, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant. You cannot abort a child at that age and claim that child is just a blob. You just can't do it science-wise. All right, comments, Vic?
2 things. Roe versus Wade, that was, the main argument was an abortion for a woman that had rape, incest, and when a mother's life's in danger.
Yeah.
Of course, that's been greatly expanded. And to add to your argument about the government, on one hand, the government says it's legal to abort a baby. But if someone shoots a pregnant mother, they could be charged with murder of two people, of the mother and the child. So how can the government on one hand say it's okay to abort a baby, but then you could be charged for murdering that baby that's in the womb? So what you're saying is that is a baby in that womb.
So legally, we know that, and scientifically, we know that. And the legal world is not going to argue that point. But somehow, the abortion gives a pass on all of that. It's just the most inconsistent thing. And I ask you to open your Bibles to Exodus 21, and we're going there in just a minute. So, now, Vic's a Democrat. He's able to see the weakness of part of that. It's not exclusively a Democratic thing where you don't have to be a Democrat to be pro-choice. But quite a few Democrats are pro-choice, and some of them are so strongly pro-choice that it doesn't matter what science says, or it doesn't matter what legally says. This is where I say, again, I'm trying to be candidly careful, but also candid. How do you do that? How do you? These politicians are not ignorant. So how do you come to go to bed at night with that kind of a decision? Dan?
You can turn that around. Same people that say it's okay to do what they're doing at the border are fighting our argument the way you want it. You can't work. So the politicians on both sides are just saying.
Yeah, Dan, and I'm not trying to, again, there's criticism going both ways. But since we're talking about abortion this morning, I'm just trying to say, how do we rationalize that?
How do we rationalize the other? The Republicans do. It's okay to leave them people down there. They don't want to spend any money to help take care of these kids that are poor like that.
Well,
They'll fight like crazy.
yeah, and
No, they're not paying taxes for that. Heck no.
that maybe gets us into a whole new world of discussion. I'm not at all opposed to discussing that. I don't want us to have a big blowout, Republican, Democrat, Independent on things like that. But there are people on both sides of that see the value of a border and see the value of rules on the border. And there are also people that are trying to get control of the situation. Part of the reason, from my vantage point, they're doing what the law tells them to do. What the law books say about who gets sent back and whatever, so.
That's what this problem in Mexico is, but if they take to America, they're supposed to take care of it, at least. And the judge side, not President Trump.
Again, we could argue that point as to what is the right thing legally to do when somebody, and we're not acknowledging the fact that there are some children brought into America that are not brought by their parents. They're being pawns.
Okay, then that's the law. They only stop them and say, I don't want that.
Yeah. All right. Again, obviously I've tripped a switch there that rouses emotion, and I knew, coming into it, how can you not talk about this? But let's just try to stay focused on the abortion part here.
Abortion is wrong as far as the Bible is concerned. But I think the Democrats and Republicans clear out.
Say the last part again, Dan.
The Democrats and Republicans clear out as far as the abortion is wrong as far as the Bible is concerned. It's not up to them.
Yeah. And I appreciate that position. I think you can. There are people on both sides that come to the conclusion that it's just wrong. So let's look at Exodus chapter 21. because this is kind of what Vic was saying. And so much of America's legal system is built from the ethics of the Old Testament, really. Verse 22, now here's where I want you to, again, take note of what you might have translation-wise, because I'm using a New American Standard, and it doesn't help this passage a whole lot. Verse 22, if men struggle with each other, okay, imagine two men kind of in a brawl here, fight. They struggle with each other, and they strike a woman with child so that she has a miscarriage. Does anybody have the word something other than miscarriage?
It's prematurely.
So that the child is born prematurely? Okay. Yeah. That's the meaning there.
Terry, mine says fruit, her fruit will depart from her.
So that the fruit departs.
Her fruit
Yeah.
will depart.
So that on the surface would make you think, did the child die? But this is telling us that the child, one of the guys banged up against the woman, and the woman gave birth prematurely. It's not a miscarriage in the case that the child died, it's a premature birth. But let's finish the passage. And it says, yet there is no further injury. He shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him. And he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life. So you can research this in all of your commentaries, and basically the argument is that if the guys are struggling and one of them causes a woman to have a premature birth, if the child is born and everything's okay, there may be a fine induced by the husband of the wife, and that can be settled in a court. But if there's further injury, meaning the further injury maybe not only to the woman but to the child as well, then there is going to be life for life. And that kind of harmonizes with the point that Vic was making in our own judicial system. Somebody, a pregnant woman, Vic, driving down the road, she's, what does the law say? How pregnant do you have to be? Somebody runs into you and the woman dies and the baby in the womb dies. So how is it reckoned?
Get you for manslaughter in that case. You can actually be charged with murder, but I don't know how many weeks.
Yeah, I'm saying though that there's a recognition that there was two lives.
Two lives.
Yeah.
So the government is recognizing that it's a baby.
Yeah. Anybody else comment? We're out of time here. All right, next week, here again, I'm venturing in a direction that I don't know a lot about at all, but I want to talk about gender bending and how it's going to really start affecting our overall families. Have you heard of this? You know what I'm talking about? Parents who are deciding we're not raising our kids to be a boy or a girl. We're going to let them evolve, let them decide what they want to be. And this is in maybe in stark denial to having a child who arrives pretty much perfectly, and they have genitalia. You can tell when the baby is born, it's a girl or it's a boy. All right, that's, if you can find the scripture on that one, I would appreciate it. But that's happening more and more in our culture. Anybody, Mark, last word? Where did Mark go?
He walked out.
Mark had his hand up, but all right, thank you.